10 bands that had the whole world behind them, and then didn't. Some were hated by critics from the first record. Some were loved by millions until the very moment they weren't. And a few faced something that still doesn't quite make sense when you look back at it. It's something that wiped them off the radio, burned their albums, and tried to erase them completely. This is the 70s, the decade that built rock into something massive and then turned on it. Here's who got caught in the fire. Number 10, Foreigner. Here's something that doesn't get said enough about Foreigner. They were hated before most people even knew who they were. Not by fans, by the press, by every music journalist who had a column and a grudge. And when you understand why, the story gets a little complicated. Mick Jones built this band from scratch in 1976. He was a session musician, an A&R man. Somebody who understood how the music industry worked from the inside out. He brought in Ian McDonald, who'd helped define the sound of King Crimson. He brought in Lou Gramm, a vocalist out of Rochester, New York, with one of the most powerful throats in rock. I've got nowhere left to hide. 3 British musicians, 3 Americans, and right from the start, nobody knew what to do with them. Not British enough for the British press. Not gritty enough for the American critics. Cold as Ice goes platinum in 1977, and the rock press basically shrugs. Then they attach a label that follows Foreigner for the rest of their career. Corporate rock. There's been heartache and pain. I don't know. And here's what that actually means. Not that the music was hollow, not that the songs were bad. I know you can show me. What it meant was, you write too well, you're too melodic, and too many people like you. That was the crime. Being too good at giving people what they wanted. I wanna know what love is. But here's where it gets messy. 1979, Head Games. The album cover, a teenage girl in a men's bathroom, causes a reaction nobody expected. Lou Gramm later described seeing it in his local newspaper. People in the Midwest throwing Foreigner albums and shirts into a bonfire in the street. Not criticism, a literal fire. And that's the moment fans actually turned. Not because the music changed, because of a photograph on a sleeve. Gramm and Mick Jones seriously considered breaking the band up. They didn't. They went on to sell another 100 million records. But that moment, watching your fans burn your shirts in the street, stays with you, whether you're famous or not. Number 9, Styx. You have to understand something about Styx to understand why people either loved them completely or couldn't stand them at all. Babe, I love you. They were, depending on who you ask, the greatest live band in America in the second half of the 70s, or the most insufferably overblown. Babe, I love you. There was basically no middle ground, and critics had made up their minds before the lights came up. Styx came out of Chicago in 1972. I'll be missing you. And for most of the mid-decade, they were a band's band. Progressive rock with a hard edge, 3 genuinely different lead vocalists, and a live show people still describe like it was a religious experience. 'Cause you know it's you, babe. Dennis D. Young, Tommy Shaw, James Young, 3 voices, 3 personalities. One band somehow holding it together, The Grand Illusion in 1977, Pieces of 8 in 1978, millions of albums, sold out arenas, and zero critical respect. Giving me the courage and the strength. Rolling Stone barely acknowledged they existed. But here's where the story turns, and this is the part that still gets me. Dennis DeYoung wrote Baby as a birthday present for his wife. Please believe me. It was never supposed to be a Styx song. He wrote it for her, played it around the band, and almost didn't put it on Cornerstone. Then they released it as a single in 1979. It went to number 1, their biggest hit, the most personal thing DeYoung had ever written. And the song longtime Styx fans pointed to as the beginning of the sellout. Think about that. The most intimate thing in his catalog, written for someone he loved. And that's what the hardcore base couldn't forgive. They didn't lose those fans because they chased money. They lost them because a love song hit number 1. Babe, I love you. In the world of 70s arena rock, that was somehow unacceptable. Over 54 million albums sold. Still not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not even nominated. And I'll let you sit with that one for a second.
Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story.
Number 8, ELO and
Mr. Blue Sky, please tell us why you had.
In 1978, Jeff Lynne rented a chalet in the Swiss Alps, sat down with a piano and a notebook, and wrote 14 of the 17 songs that would appear on Out of the Blue in just 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The album went on to sell 10 million copies worldwide and became one of the defining records of the late 70s. Rolling Stone called it totally uninteresting and horrifyingly sterile. I know, EL. O had been fighting the press since Roy Wood and Jeff Lynne put them together in Birmingham in 1970. The idea was genuinely ambitious. A rock band augmented by classical strings, trying to build a bridge between the Beatles and Beethoven. Roy Wood left in 1972, and Lynne took over completely. Songwriter, producer, arranger, lead vocalist. The albums got bigger, the tours got bigger. The stage rig they brought on the road in 1978 was one of the most elaborate in rock history. Laser shows, a giant flying saucer descending from the ceiling. And the press hated every second of it. There's something they do to bands that are too ambitious, too polished, too willing to be enormous and unapologetic about it. They call it self-indulgent, sterile, overblown. And if you keep making records that 10 million people buy, they just get louder about it. But here's the part nobody talks about. 1980, Xanadu. Jeff Lynne scores the soundtrack to a roller skating fantasy film starring Olivia Newton-John. The movie opens. Critics destroy it. And something happens that doesn't quite follow the logic of music criticism. ELO's entire legacy gets attached to a film they didn't write, didn't direct, and couldn't control. The music sold, the soundtrack sold, but the association did permanent damage to how the press saw them. Lynne later called his involvement with Xanadu his old shame. Not the Rolling Stone reviews Xanadu. That's what happens when the wrong movie picks the right music. And if you've ever had your best work defined by one thing you wish people would forget, You know exactly what Jeff Lynne was dealing with. Number 7, Grand Funk Railroad. June 5th, 1971, tickets go on sale for a Grand Funk Railroad concert at Shea Stadium in New York. They sell out in 72 hours, faster than the Beatles. Rolling Stone barely covered it. If there was ever a band that proved the gap between critical opinion and actual human beings, it was Grand Funk Railroad from Flint, Michigan. Three guys, Mark Farner on guitar, Mel Shacker on bass, Don Brewer on drums. Hard rock that was loud and direct and completely uninterested in impressing anybody with subtlety. And in the early 70s, they were the most popular American band in the world. Not one of, the most. Their albums moved millions of copies. Their shows were events. And in some critical quarters, they were described as the most hated band in rock. It wasn't even subtle. Records were panned before anyone finished listening. Too loud, too simple, too working class, too much. The same critics celebrating progressive rock sophistication and singer-songwriters' authenticity looked at Grand Funk and saw noise. Here's what's wild. The manager who built them, Terry Knight, allegedly repossessed the band's musical equipment just before they were due to play. Madison Square Garden, your own manager. Showing up backstage to take your gear the night of the show. They fired him. Got Todd Rundgren to produce We're an American Band in 1973. Hit number 1. Suddenly the critics who'd been demolishing them found a little more to say. And then, by 1976, it was over. The fans had moved on. Grand Funk broke up quietly, without the fanfare they'd earned at Shea Stadium. Years later, Rolling Stone's David Fricke said, "You cannot talk about rock in the 1970s without talking about Grand Funk Railroad. That came much later than it needed to." And if you've ever been in a room full of people who got it after the moment had passed, you already know what that kind of recognition feels like when it arrives too late. Number 6, Aerosmith. From the day they signed to Columbia in 1972, somebody was calling them the American Rolling Stones. And look, you can see it. Steven Tyler doing his Mick Jagger thing. Joe Perry as the Keith Richards of Boston. The swagger, the blues roots. The front man with the lips. For a while it worked. Toys in the Attic in 1975. Rocks in 1976. The critics who'd been writing them off as derivatives started paying attention. The Stones comparison was still there, but now it felt less like an insult, more like a compliment they'd earned. But here's what nobody was watching closely enough. While the records were getting better, the band was coming apart. Slowly at first, then very fast. The drug years. Steven Tyler and Joe Perry went so deep into substance abuse that they earned a nickname, the Toxic Twins. Shows were getting missed. Performances were becoming unpredictable. Fans who'd followed them from the Boston club circuit were watching with one eye half closed, waiting for something to finally give. And here's the moment. July 1979. A show in Cleveland. Joe Perry's wife allegedly threw a glass of milk at Tom Hamilton's wife backstage. There was a confrontation, and that was it. Perry was out of the band before the year was over. Brad Whitford followed in 1981. The records that came after barely sold. The fans who'd been waiting for something like Rocks, something with that particular locked-in ferocity, had mostly moved on. And Aerosmith spent the first half of the 80s as a cautionary tale about what happens when extraordinary talent collides with the wrong choices made the wrong number of times. If you've ever watched something brilliant fall apart in slow motion, watch someone with everything going for them, make decisions you could see coming from a mile away, you know exactly how those early fans felt. It's not anger, it's grief. Number 5, Black Sabbath. 4 working class kids from Birmingham: Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, and Ozzy Osbourne. And in February 1970, they released their first album with an opening riff built on an interval that the medieval church had reportedly banned for sounding too close to the devil. Tony Iommi didn't know that when he wrote it. He found out afterward. The critics hated them immediately. Too crude, too dark, too heavy, too direct. Rolling Stone essentially ignored them except as an example of rock going wrong. Religious groups organized protests. Parents were furious. Preachers used them as exhibits in sermons. And in a strange way, all of that attention fed the mythology because Sabbath never asked for it and never seemed remotely interested in managing it. But here's the thing that gets left out of almost every version of this story. The most frustrated people in the Satanism conversation weren't the church groups. They were actual Satanists because Black Sabbath wanted nothing to do with them. A group of real occultists invited the band to perform at a ritual at Stonehenge. Ozzy's response was essentially, "Get out of my dressing room." They refused, and the Satanists, reportedly, put a curse on them. Black Sabbath is probably the only band in rock history simultaneously despised by religious groups and cursed by actual Satanists for not being dark enough. Ozzy said once, and he said it simply without drama, "I've done some bad things in my time, but I ain't the devil." That's the whole story in one line. 4 guys from Birmingham who wanted to make music that scared people the way a horror film does. And an entire world that couldn't handle the gap between what it thought they were and what they actually were. The critical contempt never fully lifted in the 70s. But the fans never left either, because there was something honest about Sabbath, something about 4 kids who genuinely didn't know what they were supposed to be, that felt more real than all the bands who did. Number 4, Kiss. Rolling Stone, 1975. The magazine that defines critical credibility decides to name Kiss Hype of the Year. Not an award, an insult. Hype. As in, there is nothing real happening here, nothing of value, nothing under the makeup worth taking seriously. Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley, Ace Frehley, and Peter Criss had been building something since 1972 in New York City that critics genuinely could not process, or wouldn't. The makeup, the fire breathing, the blood, the platform boots, the explosions, it was theater. And the critical establishment of 1975 had decided that theater wasn't rock. Rock was supposed to be raw and unbothered by spectacle. Here's what critics didn't account for. The Kiss Army, a fan base that didn't need Rolling Stone's permission to love something. Kids who got it immediately, who understood that a Kiss concert was an experience unlike anything else they'd ever stood in front of. But here's the thing I keep coming back to, 1976. Beth, the B-side to Detroit Rock City. A soft piano ballad sung by drummer Peter Criss. A vocal so unlike anything Kiss had done that when it started getting airplay, people genuinely thought it was Rod Stewart. Not Kiss, Rod Stewart. It climbed to number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Won a People's Choice Award for Favorite New Song of 1976. Her biggest chart success from the band that critics were calling an empty gimmick. Paul Stanley said in a 1978 Guitar Player interview, "In the beginning, critics said these guys are going to last 3 months. They were wrong. He was right. They were." But being right didn't open the Rock Hall doors. They were eligible for over a decade before being inducted in 2014. Tom Morello introduced them that night and said something I think a lot of people needed to hear. Kiss was never a critics band. Kiss was a people's band. That's the whole argument. And it took the Hall of Fame more than a decade to figure out which side of it to be on. Number 3, the Eagles.
She stood in the doorway, heard the mission bell.
There's a line from The Big Lebowski. If you know the movie, you know it, where the dude says, "I hate the fucking Eagles." Man. And it's a throwaway line in the film about bowling and nihilists, but it stuck. It stuck because it said out loud what a certain generation of music fans had been thinking since about 1977. The Eagles had been one of the most critically respected bands in the early 70s. Country rock out of Los Angeles, formed in 1971. The LA Times called them the most consistent makers of quality hits of any American band since Creedence Clearwater Revival. Hotel California in 1977. Their music was everywhere, and then punk happened. The Clash, the Sex Pistols. An entire movement built on the idea that rock had gotten too comfortable, too well produced, too Californian. If you were looking for an example of everything punk was against, smooth harmonies, expensive studio time, Hollywood money, chord changes that required a lesson, the Eagles were right there, the perfect target. But here's the part that doesn't get mentioned enough. While critics and punk purists were lining up outside, something worse was happening inside. By the time The Long Run came out in 1979, the band was barely holding together. Don Henley and Glenn Frey's working relationship had deteriorated to the point where members were communicating through lawyers. The band that made Hotel California, a meticulously crafted allegory about California excess, had become the thing they'd written about, something you check into and can't leave. They broke up in 1980. Glenn Frey said the band would reunite when hell freezes over. And if you've ever been part of something that felt permanent, a partnership, a friendship, something you built with people you trusted, and watched it collapse under the weight of its own success, you know that feeling. She got the Mercedes-Benz. It's not the failure that breaks you. It's watching something you made become unrecognizable. They came back in 1994. They called the tour Hell Freezes Over. But you can never leave. Number 2, Queen. The NME, the New Musical Express, the most influential music publication in Britain, reviewed Queen's second album in 1974. Queen 2, and they called it The Dregs of Glam Rock. Then they went further. If this is our brightest hope for the future, then we are committing rock and roll suicide. A Rolling Stone reviewer around the same period wrote that Queen songs cannot decide whether to be The Who, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, or tortured chanting Gregorians.
I'm a rocket ship on my way to Mars on a collision course.
And then added, I'm not just sure what that job is. And by 1977, the NME had published a cover story on Freddie Mercury with a headline that read, Is this man a prat? If you've ever had the feeling that someone who's supposed to be an authority on something is wrong in a way that's almost impressively committed, this is that story. Because here's what was actually happening during all this critical contempt.
Good time, I don't wanna stop at all.
Bohemian Rhapsody, October 1975. Almost 6 minutes long. Radio programmers said it was too long to add to rotation. A BBC DJ named Kenny Everett got an advance copy and broke the rules, playing it on air. Listener response came in so fast and in such volume that stations had no choice. It went into regular rotation. It became one of the best-selling singles in British chart history. And critics still didn't get it.
If you wanna have a good time, just give me a call.
Here's what I think about when I think about Queen in the 70s. Freddie Mercury on stage. And if you've seen any footage from that era, you already know what I mean, was doing something that had no playbook. The theatrical range, the way he moved, the relationship he built with 60,000 people at a time. Every review that called him a camp cartoon missed the thing that made him irreplaceable. He was performing specifically for the people who had no one performing for them. Britannica describes Queen as generally dismissed by critics in the 70s. That's the official record. The other official record is that they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001 and became the first band inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2003. The critics who dismissed them were eventually, quietly, replaced by people who called them one of the greatest bands in history. Number 1, the Bee Gees. January 9, 1979, Barry, Robin, and Maurice Gibb perform at the United Nations in New York. The concert raises $100 million for UNICEF. They're at the top of everything. Saturday Night Fever has sold 11 million copies. Four songs from that soundtrack hit number 1, How Deep Is Your Love, Staying Alive, Night Fever, More Than a Woman. By any measure, they are the most commercially successful act on the planet. 6 months later, a DJ in Chicago blows up a box of their records in center field at Comiskey Park. Radio stations start advertising Bee Gees free weekends. And Robin Gibb, watching it happen in real time, called it censorship.
When you know down inside that I really do.
Here's what you need to understand about why this happened. Disco had been building since the early 70s, rooted in black culture and gay club culture.
You in my arms again, and you come to
Communities that rock radio had always kept at arm's length. When Saturday Night Fever turned disco into a mainstream phenomenon in 1977, something broke in a specific corner of the rock listening audience. A feeling that their music, their identity, was being replaced. And the Bee Gees, 3 brothers from Australia by way of England, became the face of everything the backlash needed to destroy.
You're the light in my deepest, darkest.
Steve Dahl was a 24-year-old Chicago DJ who'd been fired when his station switched to an all-disco format. He carried a grudge. On July 12, 1979, he organized Disco Demolition Night at a White Sox doubleheader. Fans could get in for 98 cents if they brought a disco record to destroy. The crowd stormed the field. Records were blown up. The second game had to be canceled because the playing surface was too damaged to use. One DJ's grudge, one night. And the genre, along with the Bee Gees' place on radio, was effectively buried. Here's the detail that still gets me. By late 1978, the Bee Gees had already decided to shift towards songwriting and production for other artists. They could feel the tide turning before it turned. Their last number one, Love You Inside Out, peaked on June 9, 1979. 33 days before Disco Demolition Night, they survived.
'Cause we're living in a world of fools.
They wrote and produced some of the biggest records of the 80s. Barry Gibb is the only surviving Gibb brother now. And if you've ever been caught in the middle of something that was never really about you, blamed for a cultural shift that was bigger than any band, any song, any album.
When you know down inside that I really do.
You know something about what those brothers experienced that summer. Some of y'all just heard the opening of Staying Alive in your head without trying. You know the one.
You're the light in my deepest dark.